in the book of Matthew, the Gospel of Matthew. And it's been really good, but really interesting.
Yeah.
Because some of these teachings are quite long. And so each week we've been reading like large portions of Scripture together. And through that, Jesus' words have created a little bit of a conflict or a little bit of a stir or raised some questions around some of that. And so
those words of Jesus can be kind of like sticky or tricky, challenging.
Yes.
And so we've been encouraging folks in the room, and we'd love to encourage you to write down questions. You can send us a direct message or put it in the chat. So if there's things that come up for you during Jesus's words, during these readings, we'd love for you to send us those questions. And then we're trying to take a little bit of time each service to kind of respond to some of those. And then there's a sixth week.
Sixth week now, recently added. A 6 week for the series called 5. So like in a few moments, actually, early in the service, we'll respond to one of the questions from last week. But some of the questions that have come in are just a little bit more dynamic or complex or thick, just something that we wouldn't be able to answer in like a 3-minute segment. And so next week, we're going to take a few of those questions and give some more time to them and respond to them. And so again, if you'd like to participate in that, you can drop questions in the chat or DM, but would encourage you to maybe join us next week or to hop in online again as we respond to some of those more dynamic questions. Now, we are also starting up some tables again, but for people who don't know, when we say tables at Westwinds, what do we mean? What is that?
Well, I love table season.
Yeah,
I'm
me too.
stoked. So tables are just a great opportunity to get to know each other, to have conversation. We usually sit around somebody's table or in someone's home and just kind of talk and share some food together and get to know each other. So it's a great opportunity to not only be with people that you know well, but also welcome people who are new to you and kind of learn from each other.
And so how can people, like if someone would like to be a part of a table or peruse the table options, what's the best way for that to happen?
So table signups are open as of today. So you can jump on westwinds.org/tables. Tables. Or you can also go on the app. They're available there as well. And you can see there's tables for every day of the week, multiple times a day. Some that are kid-friendly, and we do have some for our middle school and our little kids as well.
So I think there's like 20 different options, and so you can go and check those out. If that is intimidating for you, or you have some certain concerns or questions and trying to find the right table, what would be the best way for someone to maybe reach out and get some help?
So you can certainly reach out to me directly. I'm Carrie at westwinds.org. I know Pastor Corey would be happy to talk with you as well.
I'm Corey at westwinds.org.
Pretty simple.
Simple.
But again, you can send us a direct message, put it in the chat, and we'd love to answer any questions you might have.
So tables I think is one of the most, if not the most important thing we do together as a community in the life that we live right now, in this like epidemic of loneliness. It's so important that we find ways to gather around tables with one another. And so would love to see you take that step and participate in this table season. Otherwise, we are about 20 seconds, I think, until the band is going to kick us off with some singing. And so settle in, get a refill on your coffee, and it's going to be a really good morning. I'm really looking forward to today's message. So, see y'all.
Could see was darkness. Our hearts were formless and void. You hovered over our waters. There was light at the sound of your voice. With every new sunrise, we will come alive. You bring life where there is none. In the wilderness, remember this. You bring life where there is none. Now we see streams in the desert, rivers in the wasteland. All of the dust you make us new creations. Breathe in our dry bones, empty every grave, 'cause out of the dust you make us new creations. All we could see was darkness, our heart of our own ways. But when you said it is finished, there was light when the stone rolled away. There was light when the stone rolled away. Now we see streams in the desert, rivers in the wasteland. Out of the dust you make us new creations. Breathe in our dry bones, empty every grave, 'cause out of the dust you make us new creations. Oh, make us new creations. Oh, make all things beautiful. You make all things new, all things new. You make all things beautiful. You make all things new, all things new. You make all things beautiful. You make all things new, all things are new. You make all things beautiful. Make us new creations. Make us new creations. All right, good morning, Westwinds. Whether you're watching online or if you're in the room with us, I'd love to invite us into a moment together. And it's just for a few minutes, right? It's the next song we're going to sing is a few minutes long. But this song, I think, is a really insightful song for us to sing together in this community, because the words are, give us light, give us vision, give us love, mission, courage, power, righteousness. All of these ideal, ethereal things that are hard to grasp sometimes. But God, in his great, mysterious ways, often invites us into that mystery together, into these things that might be hard to touch or to physically see or hear or taste, all these things. But he nevertheless invites us to ask for these things, to ask for that light, that vision, that love, that righteousness. So I'd love to invite us, if you stand or sit or sing or don't sing, to be in this moment with us intentionally for the next few minutes as we sing these words, inviting God to meet us in that mystery together. All right? Foolishness strips the soul of its life, and we foolishly slipped 'cause we were all blind. But into the dark you brought in the light. blind without sight is perpetual night. Wounded healer, please. Give us light, give us vision, give us love, give us mission, give us courage, give us power, give us righteousness for this hour. Give us joy, give us faith, give us life that we can taste. Give us a cross. Jesus, give us you. Give us you. We are channels of love that flow from you. We are filled with your spirit who makes all things new. We are broken bread and poured out wine. May your kingdom come, release through our lives. Wounded healer, please. Give us light, give us vision, give us love, give us mission, give us courage, give us power, give us righteousness for this hour. Give us joy, give us faith, give us life that we can taste. Give us the cross. Jesus, give us you. Give us you. Give us light, give us vision, give us love, give us mission, give us courage, give us power, give us righteousness for this hour. Give us joy, give us faith, give us life that we can taste. Give us the cross. Jesus, give us you.
All right, you can grab a seat. My name is Corey, and this is my friend.
Hey, Carrie.
Carrie, you are joining us today for week 5 of a teaching series that we have called 5, which is based on the book of Matthew. You may or may not realize this, but the Gospel of Matthew is written around 5 large discourses of Jesus. And some of them are large. And so one of the challenges that we took on in this season is we actually wanted to read together in our gathering these large portions of Jesus' teachings. And so we've been reading the Bible more in our gathering than maybe we ever have before. But some of those teachings have caused a stir or caused a question. I don't know if you know this, but Jesus is quite a controversial figure and sometimes says things that are difficult to swallow. And so do you want to come and share a little bit how we've interacted with some of that?
Yeah, so those words of Jesus can be kind of sticky or challenging. And so if you look on your chair or on the chair next to you, there should be a card that kind of looks like this. And we've been encouraging people this series, and we'd love to encourage you this morning to write down questions that might come up for you or things that are kind of scratchy or that stick out to you in the teaching that you might want to hear us kind of talk about a little bit more. And then you can turn your cards into the black boxes in the back of the auditorium or in the lobby, and we look at those as a staff and then try to respond to them as best we can.
Yeah, and so at the beginning of each gathering, which we'll do here in a minute, we'll address kind of one question or one thought that someone turned in from the previous week. But the next week, so we've added a 6th week to our series called 5, based on the 5 teachings. So there's now 6 weeks in the series called 5, based on the 5 teachings of Jesus. You following all that? Yeah, I know you are. You're a smart group in here today. Well, part of that is because some of the questions that have turned in have been more complex than we could respond to in a 3-minute segment at the beginning of a gathering. And so I get tasked with the next week of trying to respond to some of those more difficult or challenging or thick or complex questions that have been turned in over this series. So you should try to be with us next week because some of those questions will cause people to leave the church. So you'll be able to bear witness to that, and it'll be great. So we do have a question from last week that was turned in. You want to share what that is?
We do. It says, do you believe sin looks different for each individual depending on what God is saying to each one?
Yeah, so I don't know who turned this in. Let's call her Sharon. And so everybody, that was an inside joke. Did I get you? That was great. So anyway, so I think this question, what it often lives inside of is some of the way that maybe some of us grew up in church, that there was like this kind of invisible law that we could never quite get our heads around. And if we broke it, it was called sin, and we were out, right? And so as you kind of grow up, you start realizing, man, people have maybe different views on what is sin and not sin than what I grew up with. And so how do I reconcile that? One example from my own life is I grew up in a tradition that taught drinking alcohol was a sin. And so my whole life, that's how I felt about it. That's how I thought about it. And I did this internship at a church in Indianapolis, and I lived with this family that loved the church, served the church. I lived in their home. I saw the ways in which Jesus was a part of their life and the way God had blessed them, and the Holy Spirit was moving in their families and their just the way they honored their faith. And then like 2 months in, I'm at their house, and the fella who lives there opens the fridge and grabs a beer. And I'm like, oh no. He's going to hell. You know, like I had this whole like crisis to work through, right? Which began to open my mind to say, you know what, there's like some different lives that people have. I come from generations of alcoholism. I've seen the ways in which alcohol can destroy and ruin some people's lives. But for other people, it's fine. They've been able to have a drink, sometimes even two, and be okay, and for not to destroy their lives and destroy the lives of people around them. And so I think sometimes as we move through life, there's some parts of the scriptures that are really clear, like don't do this. But it's not like an invisible law book. It's like for generations, we've seen how this ruins people's lives. For generations, we've seen how this is not a part of God's design, and it causes major problems in our life and in our world, and that is sin. But then there's like other pieces that maybe we grew up with a religion or certain ideas around sin, that as we mature, as we grow, as our minds are expanded, we meet people who like view that differently, and we need to work that out together in community in real time. So, fair enough? All right, I did my best. All right, so today, thank you for the one applause. I appreciate that. Today, Pastor Josh will be joining us in a little bit, and he has by far the most difficult teaching of Jesus to work through. So I'm glad it's him and not me, but we're going to sing together, and then Pastor Josh is going to come and try to guide us through a really challenging teaching of Jesus. Let's stand together as we sing.
This is a new song. We are still learning together. It's like the second time we've played it. But I love the words of this song because often when we go to God individually. Like we ask for things like wisdom, we ask for insight, for blessing, love, whatever it is. But this song allows us collectively as a community to ask for those things. Make us good ground, which is a reference to the parable of the seed in good soil that we referenced a couple weeks ago. So I think this will be an appropriate moment for us to use this song as a prayer together in this space with these people at this time. All right. Give me ears to hear when you're speaking. Give me eyes to see as you move. You made these hands to use for your glory. Set my feet to carry your truth. Rain down, heaven come and cover this earth. Fall on good ground, we don't want to waste your word. When your truth is hard to believe in, let our hearts be soft for receiving. Fall on good ground, make us good ground. Give me ears to hear when you're speaking. Give me eyes to see as you move. You made these hands to use for your glory. Set my feet to carry your truth. Come on, rain down, heaven come and cover this earth. Fall on good ground, we don't want to waste your word. Where your truth is hard to believe in, let our hearts be soft for receiving. Fall on good ground, make us good ground. Let your word take root and the fruit be plenty. You are the vine, our only life. Let the good news grow and the branches flourish. You are the vine, our only life. Rain down, heaven come and cover this earth. Fall on good ground, we don't want to waste your word. Hey. Come on, rain down, heaven come and cover this earth. Fall on good ground, we don't want to waste your word. Where your truth is hard to believe in, let our hearts be soft for receiving. Fall on good ground, make us good ground. You are not far, you are not so far from me. You are not far if I open up my eyes to see. You're drawing every breath, compelling every heart to beat. You are not far, you are not so far from me. In you I live and dream. In you my very being. In you I wait and move. In you I breathe and sing. You are not far, you are not so far from me. You are not far if I open up my eyes to see. You're drawing every breath, compelling every heart You are not far, you are not so far from me. You are not far, you are not so far from me. You are not far, if I open up my eyes to see. Your joy in every breath, compelling every heart to be. And Lord, you're not so far. You are not far. You are not so far from me.
I don't want to close my eyes. I don't want to fall asleep 'cause I miss you, baby. And I don't want to miss a thing. When that song came out, I was living the height of my 8th grade boy life. It was a hot summer. We were at the water park all the time. That song was blasting everywhere I went, at the mall, in the car, at the water park, everywhere. That song was an Aerosmith song released with the movie Armageddon that summer. I remember seeing that movie in theaters with my friends, like when we used to go to movies, remember? And that was one of 2 movies that came out that summer, basically about the exact same thing. There was Armageddon and Deep Impact. And they were both about this asteroid on a collision course with Earth. And they have to figure out how we're going to save humanity. And they decide to fly these people up to the asteroid to intercept it and set off a bomb inside the asteroid to try and divert it off course. Very plausible, I know. These were just wild movies, but they hold a special place in my heart, and there's some great moments in them if you ever want to check them out. But keep in mind, it was 1998. The graphics weren't the best. Those movies are among a whole series of movies about the end of the world, the end of days. There are things like 2012 was one, The Day After Tomorrow. There's all these movies about these post-apocalyptic moments, these zombie films. Maybe think way back to even like when War of the Worlds played on the radio many, many years ago. We have this, some would say, obsession or at least fascination with the end of the world. What's the end going to be like? What's it going to bring? In fact, I saw a news article 2 weeks ago that said that China is hiring for its planetary defense force. There is an asteroid headed toward Earth in the year 2032. And they're planning on how can they disrupt the asteroid. It's literally the plot of the movies, but it's in real life. And I saw last week the odds of it hitting have increased from 2% to 3%. So don't be worried yet, but it's like, can't you help but wonder sometimes? Like, what is the end going to be like? When's this whole thing going to kind of come to an end? How are we going to survive an apocalypse? We're in the book of Matthew this month in this series, and this is our 5th week and the 5th teaching of Jesus, his 5th sermon. And this is his last public appearance before he heads toward the cross and Holy Week. They're his last kind of words to the public. And he's come to Jerusalem, the central place in Israel and of Judaism. He's up on the Temple Mount where they worship and gather, and it's the most important place in their culture. He's been there all day. He's teaching with his disciples and teaching his people and being quizzed and tested by the Pharisees, the religious leaders of the day, trying to stump Jesus. And finally, after all this testing and quizzing, they're finally tested out, and Jesus comes back and responds to these religious leaders. And today we're going to read a good chunk of that text. We're actually going to read a lot of text this morning. We've been reading big chunks all month, and today is the heaviest lifting we're going to do. And so we've enlisted another volunteer to help because I don't want to read all that text myself. I need a break. So I'm going to ask Lynn if she'd come up, and we're going to read through a good chunk of Matthew 23. This first section is often called the 7 woes of the Pharisees, these 7 things that Jesus accuses them of. He says that these religious people have failed Israel. They failed what they were called to do. And he says at the end, their ancestors were terrible, and they've completed their terrible work. As Lynn reads, would you do your best to listen today and try and hear how they're described, what they're accused of, and who Jesus says that the Pharisees and the religious leaders are. Lynn, would you lead us?
Then Jesus spoke to the crowds and his disciples. The legal experts and the Pharisees sit on Moses' seat. Therefore, you must take care to do everything they say. But don't do what they do, for they tie together heavy packs that are impossible to carry. They put them on the shoulders of others, but are unwilling to lift a finger to move them. Everything they do to be noticed by others. They make extra wide prayer bands for their arms and long tassels for their clothes. They love to sit in the places of honor at banquets and in the synagogues. They love to be greeted with honor in the markets and to be addressed as Rabbi. How terrible it will be for you legal experts and Pharisees, hypocrites. You shut people out of the kingdom of heaven. You don't enter yourselves, and you won't allow those who want to enter to do so. How terrible it will be for you legal experts and Pharisees, hypocrites. You give to God 1/10 of mint, dill, and cumin, but you forget about the more important matters of the law: justice, peace, and faith. You ought to give 1/10, but without forgetting those more important matters. You blind guides, you filter out an ant but swallow a camel. How terrible it will be for you legal experts and Pharisees, hypocrites. You build tombs for the prophets and decorate the graves of the righteous. You say, if we had lived in our ancestors' days, we wouldn't have joined them in killing the prophets. You testify against yourselves that you are children of those who murdered the prophets. Go ahead, complete what your ancestors did. You snakes, you children of snakes, how will you be able to escape the judgment of hell? Therefore, look, I'm sending you prophets, wise people, and legal experts. Some of them you will kill and crucify, and some you will beat in your synagogues and chase from city to city. Therefore, upon you will come all the righteous blood that has been poured out on the earth, from the blood of that righteous man Abel to the blood of Zechariah the son of Berechiah, whom you killed between the temple and the altar. I assure you that all these things will come upon this generation. Now Jesus left the temple and was going away. His disciples came to point out to him the temple buildings. He responded, "Do you see all these things? I assure you that no stone will be left on another. Everything will be demolished." Now while Jesus was sitting on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately and said, "Tell us, when will these things happen? What will be the sign of your coming and the end of the age?"
So Matthew does this thing with Jesus quite often where he'll share a public discourse with Jesus, his kind of public teaching. And he'll bring us into a private moment with his disciples or his followers. And then he'll explain those moments through parables and through stories. It happens in the Sermon on the Mount. It happened with Pastor Corey teaching a couple weeks ago with the parable of the sower. And it happens here again today. And as they're leaving the temple, the disciples, I have to imagine they're pretty blown away by what just happened. Did you hear the words that Jesus said to the Pharisees? They're just brutal, really vicious. And these are the people that are important in the Jewish culture. And I imagine the disciples are like, what just happened up there? They're a little flabbergasted. And they're walking away and they're like, wow, Jesus, how about that temple over there? Those are cool stones. It's sweet, right? And Jesus just says, you see all these things? I assure you, no stone will be left on another. Everything will be demolished. And then they come to Jesus with two questions. Did you catch them? They say, tell us, when will these things happen? What will be your sign? What will be the sign of your coming and the end of the age? Jesus, would you tell us when the asteroid's going to hit, please? We'd like to know. It'd be nice. They think he has this crystal ball and he can give them all the answers. He's God, right? Shouldn't he know? So keep those two questions in mind as Lynn reads this next section for us.
Jesus replied, watch out that no one deceives you. Many will come in my name, saying, I am the Christ. They will deceive many people. You will hear about wars and reports of wars. Don't be alarmed. These things must happen, but this isn't the end yet. Nations and kingdoms will fight against each other, and there will be famines and earthquakes in all sorts of places, but all these things are just the beginning of the sufferings associated with the end. They will arrest you, abuse you, and they will kill you. All nations will hate you on account of my name. At that time, many will fall away. They will betray each other and hate each other. Many false prophets will appear and deceive many people. Because disobedience will expand, the love of many will grow cold. But the one who endures to the end will be delivered. This gospel of the kingdom will be proclaimed throughout the world as a testimony to all nations. Then the end will come. When you see the disgusting and destructive thing that Daniel talked about standing in the holy place, then those in Judea must escape to the mountains. Those on the roof shouldn't come down to grab things from their houses. Those in the field shouldn't come back to grab their clothes. How terrible it will be at that time for women who are pregnant and for women who are nursing their children. Pray that it doesn't happen in winter or on the Sabbath day. There will be great suffering, such as the world has never before seen and will never again see. If that time weren't shortened, nobody would be rescued. But for the sake of the ones whom God chose, the time will be cut short. Now immediately after the suffering of that time, the sun will become dark, and the moon won't give its light. The stars will fall from the sky, and the planets and other heavenly bodies will be shaken. Then the sign of the human one will appear in the sky. At that time, all the tribes of the earth will be full of sadness, and they will see the human one coming in the heavenly clouds with power and great splendor. He will send his angels with the sound of a great trumpet, and they will gather his chosen ones from the four corners of the earth, from one end of the sky to the other.
So Matthew gives Jesus answer to the second question first, that what will be the signs of your coming in the end of the age? And Jesus says it's going to be hard, it's going to be chaotic, families will be torn apart, there'll be wars and rumors of wars and famine and plague and chaos, and it's going to get really hard. It's not a very pretty picture. In fact, this is a common warning from Jesus that there will be hard times in our lives. Now, this text has all kinds of layers to it. And if you grew up in church or you're familiar with the Bible, maybe you've heard teachings on this text before. And maybe as you're hearing these words, it's a little bit even traumatizing, or you have a little bit of PTSD as you're like, what's he going to say about these words? Maybe it takes you back to some books you read in the 90s and 2000s, or you're picturing that billboard sign that says, hell is real, the end is near. This text, I have to warn you, is going to get going to get worse and more intense as we keep going, but I promise you it will get better. Can you sense the anxiety here, maybe in yourself or in the disciples? They want to know the answers. What's this future going to look like? And when he answers these questions, it's not what they were expecting. So then he goes ahead and answers their first question. When will these things happen? Lynn?
Learn this parable from the fig tree. After its branch becomes tender and it sprouts new leaves, you know that summer is near. In the same way, when you see all these things, you know that the human one is near, at the door. I assure you that this generation won't pass away until all these things happen. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will certainly not pass away. But nobody knows when that day or hour will come, not the heavenly angels and not the Son. Only the Father knows. As it was in the time of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the human one. In those days before the flood, people were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage until the day Noah entered the ark. They didn't know what was happening until the flood came and swept them all away. The coming of the human one will be like that. At that time, there will be two men in the field. One will be taken and the other left. Two women will be grinding at the mill. One will be taken and the other left. Therefore, stay alert. You don't know what day the Lord is coming. But you understand that the head of the house knew if the head of the house knew at what time the thief would come, he would keep alert and wouldn't allow the thief to break into his house. Therefore, you also should be prepared, because the human one will come at a time you don't know.
So what do you think is happening here? Is he trying to predict something? Is there some crystal ball he's talking through? Should I be nervous about the end times that are coming? Before we get too excited, I want to offer you some tools that have really helped me as I've approached passages like this, and really any passage or text that I read in the Bible. And it's this: it's whenever we approach the Bible or approach the text, we have to look at the Bible in its own context and ask, what did it mean for the original hearers? Before we ask, what's it mean for us, we should ask, what did it mean for them when they were hearing these things? The other thing to keep in mind, and this might go against what you've been told or thought, but I want to tell you today that the Bible was not written to you. I know we often feel or teach the opposite things, but it was not written to you. It was written for you and for me, that we would grow and learn from it and encounter and experience God through it, would be transformed and changed by it. But it was written to a people in a place, in a context, in a culture that was very different than the way we're living. And so when we look at the text and the words, we should keep that in mind and read it through their context first. And this whole passage has been debated and taught on and learned about by all kinds of people smarter than me who agree or disagree. And there's layers to this text for sure. But when I look at this text and in its context and weigh all these things and listen to the Holy Spirit, and I ask how the original hearers would have heard it, I think it paints a more clear picture for us. Before we go back 2,000 years to the original hearers, I want to take us back 23 years. It was September of my 11th grade year, I think it was, in 2001. It was after first period. I was walking down the halls of my school, and I saw none other than Pastor Corey just walking toward me. He had this look on his face, and I didn't know what he was going to say or what was wrong, and he walked up to me, and he just says, "Someone bombed the World Trade Centers." And in that moment, our entire world was changed forever. America, the West, the world was changed. It was a defining moment for our culture. Our foundations were shaken. Can you remember where you were when you first heard the news, if you were alive for that? What was going on? How about what you might have felt when you first heard about that? It was about more than a building collapsing, right? It was symbolic. It was an attack on the West itself. We felt like it was an attack on freedom itself. It shook our foundations to the core. Even me being up in Canada, I remember hearing as planes were being ground, airports around us, as flights were being canceled, thinking, what's happening? Are we under attack? If we go back 2,000 years, the Jewish people were experiencing a similar thing. In the year 70 AD, 70 CE, there was this group of Jews that were rebelling against the Roman occupiers, the Romans who were oppressing and who'd occupied their land. And they were trying to overthrow their rulers. And then Emperor Titus came in with 50,000 troops into Jerusalem, and he laid the city bare. He destroyed so much of the city. People were killed and separated and torn and broken, and they ran for the hills. Families were torn apart. One was taken away, one was left. And then, most importantly of all, Titus destroyed the temple. The temple where Jesus was teaching from only 40 years prior. This temple was the center of their cultural, religious, economic, everyday life. It was the most important thing in their lives. And as they ran for the hills, they could see the city burning behind them, watching their temple fall. Anything we felt on September 11th might give us a picture or a glimpse into what they felt as their world crumbled behind them. It was the defining moment for Jewish culture. And as we look at that and wonder, what might that have meant for them? Matthew was written probably in 80 or 90 AD CE, about 15 years later. So you wonder, as Matthew wrote these words, what was in his rearview mirror, thinking about an apocalypse? So Jesus teaches this message in 30. The temple falls in the year 70. And then Matthew writes these words in the years 80 or 90. What was in Jesus' mind as he shared these words? Or Matthew? What could these words mean for us today? I know it can be tempting to think of these words as predictive of some great end someday, and they do point towards truth and eventualities. But there's a couple of key verses I want to point out in the text before we get too predictive. In 23, verse 36, Jesus says, I assure you, these things will come upon this generation. I assure you, this generation won't pass away until all these things happen. And in 24:36, he says, but no one knows the day or hour that it'll come. Not the heavenly angels, not the Son, only the Father knows. Is the asteroid coming? Yes, it definitely is. But was there some crystal ball to predict every last detail? I don't think so. But I don't think Jesus needed one. I think Jesus could read the cultural context, the signs of the times. He could see where things were headed. He could feel the disruption that was happening around him. And he looked toward this coming apocalypse for his people. I don't think he needed to predict some great end that would happen, because as we saw the wars that happened in 70, the people torn apart, the families broken, their world crumbling. What was true in 70 was true in 150. It was true in the year 300, in the year 1500. It was true in 1914 and true in 1939. It'll be true today and true in the years to come. These things that Jesus is pointing toward have happened before. They'll happen again, but the end still hasn't come. I think Jesus' point, what he suggests, it isn't necessarily predictive, not necessarily about what specifically or when it's going to happen. I think what he wants to get at in this text and really all of his teachings, it's about how are we, his people, going to go through these times, and who are we going to be in the midst of chaos, in the midst of the apocalypses in our lives. So do you remember what Matthew's doing? He begins with this public teaching, and into this private moment where he kind of digs down a little more. Then he tells these parables to really flesh out what it is he's trying to say. Matthew gives us 3 parables right after all this teaching. And there's a tendency to want to pick these parables apart or read them as separate, kind of cutesy little stories. But I think what Matthew is doing is these parables, they're the culmination of what he's trying to get at. There's his explanation for this whole passage of what he's trying to say about how we're going to go through these times and who we're going to be in the midst of the chaos. They're the climax of his explanation. We're going to read one last section together and jump into 3 parables.
Who then are the faithful and wise servants whom their master puts in charge of giving food at the right time to those who live in his house? Happy are those servants whom the master finds fulfilling their responsibilities when he comes. I assure you that he will put them in charge of all his possessions. But suppose those bad servants should say to themselves, my master won't come until later. And suppose they begin to beat their fellow servants and to eat and drink with the drunks. The master of those servants will come on a day when they are not expecting him, at a time they couldn't predict. He will cut them in pieces and put them in a place with the hypocrites. People there will be weeping and grinding their teeth.
Thank you so much, Lynn. That was amazing, all that reading. We're going to jump into these 3 parables. He gives us 3 stories to explain this some more. He talks about the story of 10 bridesmaids, the story of the talents or the coins, and the story of the sheep and the goats. The first story is about 10 bridesmaids or 10 girls or 10 virgins based on your translation. And the story goes like this. There were 10 bridesmaids waiting for the groom to return. And they grab their lanterns and they go out to wait in case he returns at night. And 5 of the bridesmaids are wise, and 5 of them are foolish. And there's 5 who bring extra oil, the wise bridesmaids, and 5 who don't bring extra oil, the foolish bridesmaids. And after a long period of time, they're waiting. They don't know how long the groom's going to be. He finally returns, and they're asleep, and they wake up, and they jump up, and they hear the groom is coming. And the foolish bridesmaids say, quick, give us some oil so we can light our lamps. And the wise bridesmaids say, no, if we give you some, there won't be enough for us. Go buy some more, and then come back. So the foolish bridesmaids, they go and they buy some oil. In the meantime, the groom returns. And they go in to the celebration, the wedding feast, the party together. And the foolish bridesmaids come back, and the door is shut, and it's too late for them to enter the party. If you're like me and you grew up reading this, my default was to read this as in the people that are going to get into heaven, and for others it's going to be too late. And if that's the context you're used to, that's okay. But I want you to put that aside for a moment and look at this first from the context of the original hearers. What was Jesus saying to the disciples? I think the main point of this passage is about preparation. What was he just saying the chapter before? You need to be prepared for what's going to come. And this story is emphasizing that exactly. Think about earlier that day, the religious leaders. Jesus is lecturing them. Who of the Jews were prepared for his coming? Was it the religious leaders who were prepared to receive Jesus? Or was it the everyday people who had eyes to see and open hearts to welcome Jesus? There's a warning here. The Israelite people, so many of them missed the return of the groom because they weren't prepared to receive him. How about for Matthew's hearers 40, 50 years later? They've just lived through this chaotic moment. They're living this scattered life. They've lost their temple. And I think Matthew's asking them, you've seen what can happen. Are you prepared to welcome the groom into your life? Are you ready to have Jesus walk with you through the chaotic times that have come and will come again? And I think for us, for our invitation, I would ask, are we going to be like the Pharisees who are blind to salvation in front of us? Or will we be ready for Jesus when he shows up in our lives? If we're going to go through hard times, which we will, they are inevitable, don't we want to go through them with the groom with us, with the groom by our side? Would we be prepared and open and waiting to welcome him in when he comes to us? Prepared not for an eventual event someday, but prepared to receive Jesus with open hearts. He tells another story. It's a story of the coins or the talents. There's this man who's going away on a trip, and he calls his servants to him, and he gives them each these coins. These coins in this text are called talents. And a talent is a denomination like a quarter or a dime or a nickel, except that a talent is worth about 16 years' wages, a little more than a quarter. And he gives the first servant 5 talents. It's just an exorbitant amount of money. It's millions of dollars today to give someone 16 times 5. You can do that math, I can't. But that many years' wages worth of money. And he gives the next man 2 talents. And he gives the last man 1 talent. Still 16 years' wages. And the man goes away for a long period of time. And finally, after waiting and waiting, he returns. And so the men come and give an account of what they've done. And the first man, he says, Master, I've taken your 5 coins and I've made 5 more. I have 10 coins now. And the master says, great job. You've been a faithful servant. You've been faithful with a little. I'm going to give you a lot. My son, he's 2.5. He's obsessed with a lot. He wants a lot of everything. He says, no, I want lot. I want lot. This master says, you're going to be given a lot. The next guy, he says, Master, you gave me 2 coins, and I've made 2 more. I have 4 coins now. And the master says, you've been faithful with a little. I'm going to give you lot. I'm going to give you lot. And then the last man, he says, Sir, listen, I know you're a hard man. You harvest where you don't sow. You make money where you don't even invest. And so I was afraid, and I buried your coin in the ground. And the man says, you're a wicked and lazy servant. Why didn't you at least put the money in the bank? I could have gained a little bit of interest. And he casts him out and sends him away. And he gives his 1 coin to the man who has 5 coins. It feels like a hard teaching. What's the invitation to the first hearers, those disciples? I think it's a warning about stewarding your responsibility. It's about being good stewards, not financially, but with what you've been given. The Jewish people, Israel, had been given an opportunity to steward the abundance of God. They'd been blessed to be a blessing to the world. They've been tasked with putting their God, Yahweh, on display to everyone around them. And what did Jesus say earlier that day in the text about the Pharisees? He said, you've been squandering what you've been given. And instead of making it easy to enter the kingdom, you make it harder for people. You get in the way of people coming to Jesus, coming to me, coming to God. You've been a terrible steward of what you've been blessed with, this abundance. The workers had no idea when the man would return, but instead of focusing on when the end would come or what's going to happen, they needed to focus on stewarding their time well. How about Matthew's hearers a few years later? They've experienced the apocalypse, these hard times. And they say, well, you learn from what's happened before. you don't go through this again. Will you steward your time here well, your responsibility well? And for our invitation, I want to first of all reiterate just the abundance in this passage. The talents are worth so much. We've all been given gifts and talents and abilities, unique personalities. The abundance of gift inside each of you is exorbitant. It's more than can even be imagined. You are so incredibly valuable in the way you've been created and made and formed and shaped. Will you be aware of those gifts and receive them and steward them well? A couple things to point out is the first thing is each person has different expectations on them. The man with 2 coins isn't expected to make 5 coins. The person with 1 coin isn't expected to make 5 coins or 2 coins. And you have to steward whatever it is you've been given, to steward that little bit well. And the second thing is, I think the bar is actually set relatively accessibly in that the man says to the guy with 1 coin, why didn't you at least put it in the bank? Like, make a little bit of interest. Do something with what you've got. You've got so much. Do it. Just don't do nothing. That's all I would ask. And for us, like, we've been given just so much. Just who you are is such a gift. Would you steward that well and do something with the enormous gift we've been given? As we wait, as we prepare, as we're conscious that hard times will come, let's steward these times we're in with the gift that we have and are. The last story is a more famous parable. If you've been around church long enough, you've probably heard it a couple of times. But again, let's read it in the context of the hearers. What's Matthew doing? What's he trying to say? What questions is he answering? It's, when is the end going to come? And what will be the sign of your coming, the end of the age? What's it going to be like? He isn't answering the when specifically or the what specifically. He's answering the how are we going to go through it and who are you going to be while it happens. The last parable goes like this. One day a king will sit on his throne. He'll gather all the nations before him. He's going to separate them on his left and his right, like a shepherd does with his sheep and the goats. He's going to put the sheep on his right and the goats on his left. And he says to those on his right, he says, you have been so wonderful. Please come into my kingdom and receive your inheritance. Because when I was hungry, you gave me some food. When I was thirsty, you gave me a drink. When I was a stranger, you welcomed me. When I was sick, you took care of me. When I was in prison, you visited me. And those on his right, they say, when did we do these things for you? We don't remember that. And he says, whenever you did it for the least of my brothers and sisters, you did it for me. And he'll turn to those on his left and say, get out of here, be gone into the eternal fire. For when I was hungry, you didn't feed me. When I was thirsty, you gave me no drink. When I was a stranger, you didn't welcome me. When I was sick, you didn't take care of me. And when I was in prison, you didn't visit me. And they're like, when didn't we do these things? Like, we would have, if we'd known it was you, we would have. And the king says, whenever you didn't do it for the least of my brothers and sisters, you didn't do it for me. Again, this isn't a story, I don't think, about who's in or who's out. It's not about passing some test or being perfect in every single thing, following all the perfect rules. I think it's actually about the opposite. Think about the religious leaders of the day, the Pharisees. They followed all the rules. They had all of the right things they were supposed to do. Remember the reading about the mint and the dill and the cumin? They tithe on every little piece of spice to make sure they had exactly 10%. But he says, you miss the important things of the law, justice and peace and faith. When he shared these words to the Pharisees, the people would have been as surprised that day as the sheep and the goats were. You mean the people that teach us how to live, that have all the answers, aren't doing it right? And he says, if your heart isn't in the right place, following all of the rules perfectly isn't going to matter. Because both groups in the story, the sheep and the goats, are both surprised. They're both unexpected. The Pharisees think they've got it going. They think they're on the up and up. And the sheep, they don't even realize they've done it. They don't even realize they're doing the right things because they've been so formed in a way that it's their natural expression of who they are, just to take care of those around them. What's one of the biggest criticisms Jesus gives the Pharisees? What's he called them over and over again? He calls them hypocrites. And that word, we tend to think of it as somebody who says one thing and does another. But the literal word that hypocrite comes from is the word actor, to be an actor or wear a mask on a stage. They knew how to act the part, the Pharisees. They could put on a performance, but they had no formation. They weren't formed. For Matthew's hearers, the suffering is happening. They've experienced these hard times. Are they taking care of each other in the midst of this? How about for us? I think a good prayer for us today, or a place to start, would be, God, would you please form me so that I do these things in a way that I don't even realize that they're happening. That when I'm told good job, I'm like, what? I was just living my life how I wanted to live. But I've been shaped in a way that's a natural expression of who I am. Would you move me away from performance and into formation? And so as the world around us is freaking out about when's the end going to come, what's going to happen, as we're divining our crystal balls, as we're saying things on social media and in the newspapers about the end is here, I want you to remember our concern isn't about predicting, but it's about preparation. Are we preparing ourselves to receive Jesus? Preparing ourselves for what's to come? Are we being responsible for the gifts we've been given, the abundance in our lives, to do something with all the goodness that's inside of you? And are we being formed in a way that taking care of those around us, our brothers and sisters, it's just the very essence of our being. It's a natural part of who we are. And as we head into hard times, that will be so formed, and the what and the when will be so overshadowed by the how we go through these times and who we are in the midst of chaos and in the midst of an apocalypse. Would you pray with me this morning? God, would you continue to shape us as people, as a community? Would you form us to just give us hearts to so deeply care for those around us, that it's just our innate natural tendency to want to care for those in need, that it's just the outpouring of what you've given inside of us. Help us to steward the abundance of ourselves well, the amazing gift that each of us is. And help us to prepare for what's to come, not in a stressed out or predictive way, but every day trying to turn ourselves more toward you, to be open to you, and to receive you into our lives in deeper and more complete ways, completely open before you. God, thank you for your words to navigate some of the chaos that life brings. Pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Lord, make me an instrument of peace, an instrument of peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is darkness, let me sow light. For in the giving we shall receive, and in the dying we're given life. Lord, instrument of peace. Lord, make me an instrument of peace, an instrument of peace. Where there is sorrow, let me sow hope. Where there is doubt, let me sow faith. Where there is injury, your pardon give, your consolation to those in pain. Lord, make me an instrument of peace, an instrument of peace. Lord, make me an instrument of peace, an instrument of peace. Lord, make me an instrument of peace, an instrument of peace. Lord, make me an instrument of peace, an instrument of peace. Amen.
I just want to say thanks to Pastor Josh. That kind of a sermon from someone who has to do this often takes a lot of work to walk through such a complex piece of text. And we didn't want to just blow over it. We wanted to walk through it. And so thank you for all the work you put in to that. And for, you can... And I also want to say, since the world is ending in 7 years, we do have some next steps for us today that you can engage in. We are entering into a time in our church. Twice a year, we gather around tables in homes and around communities. And we're about to open another season of tables. And Carrie has been fearlessly leading the charge on this round of tables. Carrie, for those who maybe have never participated in a table, what is it?
Yeah, so tables are just a great opportunity to get to know each other. Usually we sit around someone's table or in someone's home and just have conversation and eat good food. So in Lent, we'll have a kind of a conversation guide that groups can use, and it'll just help us kind of travel that Lenten journey together. But yeah, it's just a good way to take steps towards each other and meet new people if that's something that is interesting to you, and also be with new friends or old friends that we've known for a while and get to know them in new ways.
Yeah, and what's I think really awesome is we have like 20 tables this round that people can sign up and be a part of. So if folks want to like read about the different tables, when they are, where they're happening, or they'd like to say like, you're ready to sign up for one, how does that happen?
Yeah, so there's a QR code on the chair in front of you. You can scan that. It'll take you right to the website where you can get more information, or you can go to westwinds.org/tables, and it'll say, I think it says like browse open tables. And like Corey said, there's 20 tables, so you can kind of read through. There's one on, I think, every day of the week. There's some for families. There's some for kids. We have a table for our littles with their adults and a middle school table as well. So there's community really for all ages.
Yeah, so I just really encourage you. I mean, we live in a time that many have referred to as an epidemic of isolation or an epidemic of loneliness. I think this is one of the most important things we do together as a church. Find space together to share space with each other, to get to know each other beyond, a high five in the lobby. And so I'd really encourage you during this Lenten season to get involved in a table. And what I'm really excited about is 20 tables means that we have over 30 people who have signed up to either host or co-host a table. that's awesome, right? So way to go, y'all, for jumping in and making space in your homes and your lives. I'm also really excited. We last Sunday, we got to baptize 6 different people as a part of our gathering. What's really cool about that is, if you've been paying attention, it was 8 weeks before that we also baptized 6 people. So we've been able to baptize 12 different people into the kingdom of God, into our community, into their steps towards Jesus. 12 people in the last 8 weeks. So God has been really moving in our community in a really unique way. And so that's why I unashamedly right now would love to invite you to participate through giving. We have new people coming to our community every day. We want to surround them and support them, be able to walk with them. And what helps us do everything we do here together is that there's a group of people who give so faithfully. And so those of you who give, thank you for your faithfulness. For those of you who have been considering giving, this would be a great time to start. There are so many ways you can participate in that. If you'd like to give old school, cash or check, there are boxes by the doors in the back. There's also some boxes out in the lobby. If you'd like to give electronically, that's how my wife and I give. We have it set up every 2 weeks when our paycheck comes. We set up a gift to Westwinds, westwinds.org/give. You can do it that way. If you're like super hip and want to try this like new tap to give technology that we have, there's tap to give stations out in the lobby where you can like tap your smartwatch or your smartphone or your card and give a predetermined amount just today. And that tap to give is completely anonymous, just so you know. So we'd love to invite you into that as well. All right. We are longer than normal. I think given the text today, you can see why. Thank you for journeying with us through this morning. I hope it's been hopeful for you and that you can move into this world with a new amount of anticipation about what God is doing in us and through us and around us. So we're going to close by standing together and reading the Lord's Prayer together. Carrie, would you lead us in that today?
Yeah. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us today our daily bread, and forgive us our